Okay, everyone. And one more in. We're off to the races. Hello. Is there a God? Is there a great genius painter, or is it all a figment of our monkey brains, a need to find meaning in a meaningless universe? Is Darwin giggling in his grave at the thought of consciousness? Or is there, as Shakespeare wrote, more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy? Welcome to another Zoom meeting and podcast of Here's Tom with the Weather, where we investigate the plethora of higher powers that populate the vast universe of 12-step recovery, where alcoholics riff out on steps 3 and step 11 as prescribed by the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, who encourage us to find some kind of higher power. Here at Tom, we promote tolerance and empathy for folks who have different spiritual practices than us. It's all about live and let live. And please remember that this is not an AA meeting. It's just some people's version of the truth, whatever that might be. And just a quick message, we run this whole account for free. So we welcome any contributions via PayPal at gilwriter@hotmail.co.uk. That's GILWRITER at hotmail.co.uk. And anyway, back to the business at hand. Sometimes we talk to seekers, to gurus, and people not necessarily in recovery, but today we are. We're speaking to Noah Levine. Hey, Noah, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. This sounds like a fun conversation to have.
I think it might be. Well, it depends on how far you want to go. So thanks you sent me a bio, so I'm just going to give you a quick bio for anyone who's not familiar with Noah. So Noah is the author of Dharma Punx, Against the Stream, The Heart of the Revolution and Refuge Recovery. He's a Buddhist teacher, author, and counselor. He's created a Buddhist approach to addiction recovery called Refuge Recovery. He's also the founding teacher of Against the Stream Buddhist Meditation Society with a meditation center in Venice Beach, California. That must be a hard life. He teaches meditation classes, workshops, and retreats internationally. Noah holds a master's degree in counseling psychology, and he lives in Los Angeles. And you can go to, I think there's a couple of websites, but the one that I've got here is www.againstthestream.com. So Noah, we had a conversation during the week as a bit of a pre-interview, and I just wanted to, in case anyone didn't know, I know that you've been under quite a lot of pressure over the last few months, and I just wanted to get the elephant out of the room straight up. How are you using the program to get through your ordeal of the past few months? So are you dealing it? How are you using the 12 steps to deal with the claims, etc., that's been going? Would you give us a bit of background on what's been going on?
Sure. It was about 3 years ago now. I'm 33 years sober. I got sober in 1988, and right around 3 years sober, things in my life started to fall apart. Several things happened. My marriage ended around that time. My father, who was a famous meditation teacher, Noah Levine, killed himself, at the end, had some terminal illness and a little kind of assisted suicide and Refuge Recovery had grown. Refuge Recovery was to the point where there was almost 800 meetings. I had written this book and kind of my own recovery using Buddhist principles, and it had grown to almost 800 meetings, and I was running a treatment center with a detox and residential and getting people to meditate from the beginning of their recovery. And Against the Stream, the Buddhist organization, had grown to where we had like 5 meditation centers around North America. And in the midst of that, the sort of the height of kind of 30 years sober and all of this service and success, and then also loss and grief, and at the beginning of the Me Too movement, a woman that I was dating said that something non-consensual happened between us after we'd been dating for some months. And this was used by some people in my communities to create this totally large and devastating accusation that, from my perspective, had very little truth to it. I'm sure that I had a part. I always have a part in everything. But the kind of the way that it got turned was it got turned to the point where like the treatment center went out of business, the meditation centers closed. It was cancel culture. It was the kind of immediate cancellation of everything, and it just sort of went from doing lots of stuff and being of service in lots of ways to like blacklisted by the Buddhists in America and by the treatment industry and all of that. And how, so that's the part of the scene. And so what did I do? I kept meditating. I kept going to meetings. I, got the, best therapist to kind of walk through it with me. I reached out to some of my Buddhist teachers who, for the last 33 years have been supporting me. And some of them were like, you're bad for business. We don't want to have anything to do with you. And some of them, especially this incredibly special Buddhist monk by the name of Ajahn Amaro, who's out there in England, David, out at Amaravati Monastery. And he's been my teacher for over 30 years. And I reached out to him and said, like, hey, this is going on. I need support and I need to kind of figure this out. And will you help unpack it with me? And I want to take full responsibility for whatever ways I've been unskillful that co-created these scenarios. And then also see what is just the social political reality of the kind of culture of fame, that's happening, and the kind of desire to dismantle the patriarchy, which I'm with personally. Yes. But also I'm part of the patriarchy, so it's it's a tricky position to be in.
Okay.
So for the last 3 years, you said the program, I go to 12-step. Refuge Recovery is more close to my heart than 12-step, but I never stopped going to 12-step. I've been going consistently for the last 33 years. But the main practice that is not a 12-step practice, that's a Buddhist practice, is forgiveness meditation. And it's something that I've been doing for decades, but especially these last few years, of asking for forgiveness for all of the ways that I've caused harm internally in meditation, offering forgiveness to all of the people that I have felt harmed by, and forgiving myself, offering myself forgiveness, both sort of like almost inner child, like thinking of myself as a kid and an adolescent and young adult and an adult in full karmic responsibility, forgiving myself, knowing that I still own the karma of my actions. So there's, a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And I don't want to dwell too much on it because I want to talk to you more about the spiritual stuff, but I just want to talk to you. There's a quote that I found. It says, I think the quote goes from, you thought the accusation to the attention of you brought the accusation to the attention of the Teachers Council, the whole situation, all of it, before there were any complaints. And they did an investigation, and the investigation came back with exactly what you told them, that no students were involved. And you said personally, this is the quote that I love, I can see a lot of wake-up calls, you say. One is a lack of awareness, a lack of taking full responsibility for my role as a founder of a Buddhist community. I've been a bit oblivious about the amount of power, the amount of projection, the amount of responsibility that comes with this. What do you mean by projection? What does that mean?
We humans have a tendency to put people on pedestals, to project perfection, especially if somebody helps you, inspires you in some way, and can tell you, spiritual teachings, and you can, project perfection onto somebody, even if they are saying, in my case, where I felt like I was pretty transparent about, like, hey, I'm not a perfect person, I'm not an enlightened person, I have, my own shortcomings, and but here's what the Buddha taught, and here's what I'm trying to live into, and here's what I've been trying to live into. But there can be this projection of like, well, you should be perfect at that since you're teaching us about it. That's part of my Yeah.
Okay, because I find it interesting because we've been doing this podcast for 18 months, and personally, I've learned a lot about AA, particularly the history of AA, and it's sort of, as I've become more open to do AA meetings all around the world, from the United States to Ireland to England to Scotland to Australia, New Zealand, blah blah, everything. Everyone has pretty much the same stuff, but there's a tendency, for instance, to put Bill W. up on a pedestal, for instance, and there's this golden light and all those great black and white photos of him making coffee and doing breakfast and looking wise and stuff. But he was a very fallible human being, and I think for me, there's a danger in making our, particularly AA people, putting them up on a pedestal and turning them into little gods. That's only my opinion. What's your take on that? Similar?
Yeah, similar. There's some line between respect and gratitude, and and also seeing people as imperfect, and still being, I guess there's that thing around like the wounded healer, and my own feeling around Bill and Bob of like, I have a lot of gratitude that those old guys got this thing going. I'm super grateful, but I also see them as a bit confused and not all that wise in some ways. But so glad that they got this thing going for us, and that here we are, 88 years later, it's still going. And that kind of projection feels like Bill gets a lot more attention than Bob.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. My own sense is that Bob was actually a little bit cooler than Bill, but Bill became the kind of spokesperson, and and then there's a lot of criticism, like people are really quick to say like, oh, he had all of these affairs and, was seducing newcomers and all of that stuff. And like, as soon as there's the projection and the pedestal, there's the criticism that goes along with like, we gotta knock him down. We gotta, rather than just being like, yeah, totally, it was imperfect, and he caused some harm, and he helped a lot of people, and he caused some harm, and can we have both?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, is how that sort of permeates into AA from the outside world, is that we put these leaders up on pedestals and they're supposed to be perfect, but in AA, we're very fallible, dysfunctional human beings. I mean, we're all screwed up when we come in here, and a lot of us stay screwed up, and I'm screwed up, but it's I think, as I said, I think there's a bit of a danger, but I'll get off my soapbox here. Tell us, let's move on. So thank you very much for doing that, and thanks for clearing the elephant out of the room, as it were. Tell us about the punk side of you and where you came from. Can you give us a bit of an insight into Noah? I know you come from a pedigree of Buddhism, but what was your spirituality like before you came into AA, or you started coming into with the 12 steps?
I don't feel like I had any spirituality. What I did have, I'm 50 years old. I was born in 71. I started getting loaded when I was like 6 years old, 5, 6, like smoking weed, drinking booze, like as a child. When I heard punk rock in like 1980, like 79, 80, and I heard it, and I was 8 or 9 years old, I was like, this is it. Like, if there was any sort of spirituality to me, it was like, this music, this is the voice of God. I don't even believe in God, but this is the voice of God, like.
Hold on, are we talking British punk here or American punk? What kind of punk?
Both. By like 1980, and I heard the Pistols, and I heard the Clash and the Ramones, and I heard the Damned, and I heard, but I also heard Black Flag, and I also heard Circle Jerks, and I also heard, some of the, I was listening, and before I heard punk, I was listening to like Ted Nugent and AC/DC, throwing an Australian band for you guys. And it's like that stuff was just like, oh, hard, loud, that's how I feel inside. And so it was resonant, it was resonant. And so I didn't have any, I took lots of psychedelics. There's all of this kind of, conversation about psychedelic spiritual. I ate LSD hundreds of times by the time I was 16 years old. I started eating LSD when I was like 11. But it wasn't a spiritual experience to me. It was just fucking weird and fun. And my parents were spiritual. My father was a meditation teacher. He wrote, Stephen Levine. He wrote books with Ram Dass. He was, he was there with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross doing Death and Dying, like doing super cool stuff. They were spiritual. I was angry and wounded and thought that their hippie spirituality was total bullshit. And then I, was locked up over and over and suffering so much that when I was 17 years old, my father, while I was incarcerated, said, "Why don't you try meditation?" And I had a little bit of a that sounds like useless. Well, how about if you get me a lawyer? Like, I need some real help. I don't need to meditate. I need to get out of prison, But I started meditating. I started doing basic mindfulness meditation. And I know I'm jumping ahead from your question, but I feel like when I was, the closest thing to spirituality to me was community, was being part of the punk scene, being in the slam dancing, at the show, on acid, doing speed, whatever, out of my head in a self-destructive, but connected part of something.
Yeah, that's like a satsang, so a punk satsang kind of thing, that feeling, sense of community. Okay, that's great. So, but where did the 12-step fellowship? I'm not going to harp on too much about that, but what was your first meeting? How did you end up going to your first meeting?
I started getting sent to 12-step meetings in 1984. So I was 14 years old. I was in junior high school, grade 7 or 8, but I was getting arrested at school and then in the system for marijuana and alcohol, and they started sending me to these court things, and they were like, "You got to go to these AA meetings and get your court card signed." So I was introduced to it very young, but I didn't connect. I was like, "Oh, these are adults. They're talking about God. It's some weird religious cult. I don't know what's going on here. Plus, I'm stoned at the meeting anyways. I'm not really paying attention." But it might have planted some seeds. And it wasn't until that time that I was starting to go on about, where I was 17, 88, sitting in juvie, where I knew, at this point, I knew I'm an addict. I need help. I can't stop on my own. I'm smoking crack, I'm shooting heroin, I'm drinking in the morning, I'm drinking all day, I'm drinking until, I can't, and drinking myself to sleep. But I didn't really think like AA was the solution for me. I didn't know, I felt hopeless. But sitting in this institution, juvenile institution, they came in, H&I came in with meetings, with, hospitals and institution meetings. And I went to my first voluntary meetings and was like, "I'm here to listen, I need some help." And I had started doing the mindfulness meditation and found a little bit of help in the meditation. It's like, I'll go here. I knew one of the guys that was bringing the meeting in from the streets. And so that helped. And then I was pretty much in, but I had that reservation. I'm 17. Can I be a real alcoholic? Like, I know I need to stop smoking crack and shooting heroin. Like, I know that's a problem. But alcohol, like, can I really never have a drink again? I wasn't sure. And I had some reservation, and I was locked up for a few months. And then as soon as I got a chance, I tried some controlled drinking. I thought, I'll have a couple beers, see how it goes. Yeah. And, the experiment, as it has been probably for all of us on one level or another, was once I start, I can't stop. And I'd never tried to stop before, but now I was trying to stop and I can't stop. And I did that a couple times, and I was like, okay, they're onto something over here. Abstinence, sobriety. Let me really try that. And I never drank again. And I continued to go to, 12-step meetings for the last 33 years. And, we can get into it, but I have a lot of different philosophical, spiritual perspectives in my own life than the 12 steps teach.
Let's hear it.
But I continue to engage. Like, I'm a secretary. I have a meeting tonight that I secretary. I'm in it, but I'm an infidel from within it.
Right.
I'm an outspoken atheist. I'm
Wow.
within.
So we've got a few in here. We've definitely got a few in this meeting. Definitely.
Yeah.
You're not alone. That's so they're 17 years old as well. I mean, I'm always in awe of people who come in at any age, but 17's did you literally feel like a fish out of water? What was that like coming in? I can't imagine coming in at 17. I'm bonkers now, but I was bonkers when I was 17. Absolutely.
I mean, I was definitely bonkers, but also I felt like my life was almost over. You know, I was on the live fast, die young. You know, Sid Vicious was, you know, like I wasn't planning to make it to 25. So I didn't feel like a kid. I felt like I'm getting near the end already. I don't even know if I'm going to make 25. But also it wasn't that bad. Where I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, and once I started going to meetings, there was young people's meetings, and I got to walk into a room of 50 teenagers and people in their early 20s that were actually trying to stay sober. So I wasn't completely a fish out of water as, going in with just the old men smoking their cigars and drinking their coffee. It was, there's a bunch of punk rock kids in there from the streets that were trying to get sober. And statistically unlikely, probably 10 of those 100 people, and maybe that is the statistic, 10%, but probably 10 of those people are still sober today and are still engaged and are still in my life. Pretty wild.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I always think it's like those little, when baby turtles are born and they go out on the beach, there's about a million of them go out, and I think 2 come back about 10 years later. And that's, I've seen it over the years in the meetings. Atheist and Buddhist, how does that reconcile? I know a fair bit about Buddhism. I don't know that much. I don't profess to, but how do you reconcile being an atheist with being Buddhist? How does that work?
Well, Buddhism itself is non-theistic. There's no higher power in early Buddhism, in the original teachings of the Buddha, and he was actually quite critical of theistic religious and spiritual perspectives as being delusional. And so it actually fits perfectly. Some of the later developments of Mahayana Buddhism, and people sort of even turned the Buddha into some sort of deity that they worship. They're bowing to the statues and doing all this stuff. But a lot of what we see in Buddhism that looks a bit worshipy and theistic is in direct contradiction to the Buddha's actual teachings, his early, his message, which was humanist psychology. The Buddha's teaching was the cause of suffering is within us. It's repetitive craving. It's our survival instinct. The end of suffering is also within us through our own mindfulness. There is an intervention, and we can develop non-attachment and compassion and forgiveness. And all of it is from the human, the human ability to see clearly and respond wisely without any sort of belief in a divine intervention.
Okay, yeah. It brings to mind, one of my favorite films is Monty Python and the Life of Brian. And I think there's a 2-minute stretch in that film where they actually describe how religion can get distorted. They follow the gourd or follow the shoe. And I think you see, I don't know if you remember, one of them takes Brian's shoe and hundreds of them follow that. And then one of them takes the gourd and they follow that. And it becomes this whole sort of split up tree of dogma that just goes, it was just genius. I love the way that's done. And just on that, so what you're saying, that there's different sects or different denominations of Buddhism, but in the end, am I right in saying that the Buddha got to enlightenment and that was it? He didn't sort of explain anything thereafter? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think you are right. There was certainly times where the Buddha actually refused to answer theistic cosmological questions. But then there's other places where he quite clearly states that he doesn't believe in it. That it's not, like, one of my favorite teachings is, when a Brahmin, a Hindu Brahmin comes comes to the Buddha and says, do you do the like their higher power is the Ganges, right? Is the purifying river, and like, do you and your people wash in the Ganges to wash away your sins and your impurities? And the Buddha says, of course not, like, because that would never work. There's, that sort of belief, and that is, he says, what we do is internal bathing. Through our own mindfulness, we wash away the things that block our freedom through wise attention, investigation, concentration, contemplation. We use the mind to do inner bathing. We don't go outside of ourselves to some sort of, devotional ritual that is, quite delusional.
Yes, yeah. So using external factors to sort of have some sort of symbolic cleaning of what's on the inside. Yeah, I see what you mean there. That's great. I'm about to hand you over to our very own atheist that we put up on a pedestal myself. That's Joe C in Toronto. I think you might have heard of Joe or know Joe. But I just wanted to ask you one question, and just goes back to what I mentioned before. What's this enlightenment thing? And do I have to go through and sit on a mountain to get enlightenment? How do I get enlightened?
First of all, how would I fucking know? Second of all,
oh, come on. I'll send you $20.
What I will say is that the core, what I understand of the Buddha's third noble truth, which is that nirvana is possible, enlightenment is possible in this lifetime, is that what it is a radical shift in our relationship to pleasure, where we can meet pleasure with non-attached appreciation. And not, because it's clinging to pleasure that causes our suffering. Enlightenment is no longer clinging, no longer suffering about becoming attached to impermanent, pleasant experiences. The other side of it is learning to meet all of our pain with compassion. Instead of our suffering, which is like, I hate this, I can't tolerate this, training our heart and our mind to be accepting and friendly and forgiving and compassionate, and not suffering about the pain that we experience in life, but meeting it with compassion. And maybe the third component to this enlightenment business is turning towards and seeing the nature of our own minds and our own bodies and our own process, human process, heart, as not being so personal, of not being such a solid, separate I, me, mine, self-centered identity. And that when you cannot take your own mind so personal, and you can meet your pain with compassion, and you can meet your pleasure with non-attachment, you won't suffer anymore. You're fucking enlightened.
Wow.
A simpler way of saying that: seeing clearly reality as it is, awake to the impermanent, the impersonal, the unsatisfactory nature, and responding appropriately. A wise response to clear seeing is the definition of the Buddha's enlightenment.
Sorry, Joe, I just want to riff out on this just a little bit. Just hold on, Joe. So what is this consciousness stuff where I'm aware of being alive? Is that some form of enlightenment, or is that some level of, when that whole thing of when you push play record and you're aware of being alive and there's some sort of permanence about it? What is that? What state of awareness is that?
It's the right question. That's the right question. What is this that is aware? What is this consciousness that so quickly we say, well, that's me. I am aware. But it's the right question of, well, what part of this I is the awareness? And then under the investigation of, and is it permanent? Is it constant? Is it continuous? Because also the mind, based on memory, says like, well, I remember being conscious as a child, and I remember all of the traumatic things that have ever happened, and now I'm aware of this. And so there must be this continuity of self that consciousness is. Without mindful investigation, it's easy to just land in I am. What was it? Whoever that old white guy was that says, I think, therefore I am. Right? Like, It's like, oh, you didn't go deep enough. You didn't ask enough questions. There's thoughts and there's consciousness, but where's the self in that? And that continuing to investigate rather than answering it, right? Rather than, well, this is what's conscious. It's a byproduct of the brain and the nervous system and perception. And, there's an answer, but the answer isn't so useful. The question is really useful.
Yeah. I'm not going to, anyway, look, I'm going to hand you over to Joe. Joe C., you got a couple of questions, mate? Over to you.
Sure. Good to see you, Noah. How you doing? In my travels, the internet changed everything in my recovery, because I didn't believe in a prayer answering, sobriety granting type of higher power. And I could see lots of people were getting sober lots of ways. And Darren Littlejohn's book came out just before yours did. And I like that. And I was in LA in 2014 in November, and I went to my first refuge recovery meeting down there. And I was there for the International Secular AA conference, was in Santa Monica. And one of the guys was a regular there, which is often the case. In Calgary, there's a refuge recovery meeting right in the LGBTQ center. And then just down the street in the hospital, the We Agnostics meeting, and a lot of people just sort of walk and talk on their way from one meeting to the other. But what I really was impressed with, and I need you to sort of suss this out for me a little bit, was the idea of introducing mindfulness and meditation like right away, like what a useful process, even if you're coupling it with something like the 12 steps, thinking about powerlessness, or, thinking about inventory or any of those things. But when I got sober, it was sort of the transcendental meditation time. I got sober in Montreal, and they would often, some groups you would hear after the Serenity Prayer, Om, right? And that whole idea of clearing my mind just was impossible for a dyslexic ADHD kid, right? Who I couldn't go a minute without being horny, right? So I couldn't just, meditation was so frustrating for me when I was new. So like, how well does it work, especially with young people, with new people with the short attention spans, that people coming out of the crack house into the Dharma recovery meeting? Is it just meet them where they're at, and let's try it for 30 seconds. Let's not try to blow our brains out. Because I know this is part of why you took the whole treatment approach, sort of something other alternative to the sort of 12-step facilitation type of thing. So when you're new with that sort of, crazy brain, that sort of tornado brain, and meditation, what are a few tips for people just coming to it for the first time?
There's a lot there. What we're seeing is that actually defining meditation as so much more than quieting your mind or needing it to be any certain way, making a really wide definition of, meditation is just the intention to be present with whatever's happening, including lots of thoughts, and including lots of discomfort, and including lots of cravings, and lots of, like you said, thinking about sex or whatever. Like, that's okay. You can sit here and think about sex, and you can sit here and have cravings, and you can sit here and watch all of those thoughts arise and pass. And that's the difference between mindfulness and like TM or some of the other concentration based, where there's this sort of goal that we're trying to create a certain experience, and that you need to meditate, and it needs to make you feel good. There needs to be a And Buddhist mindfulness is like, oh no, you're not going to necessarily feel good in the beginning. You're just going to see what is. It's my definition of enlightenment. You're going to see what is. What is there's this repetitive craving in my mind and lust in my body and aversion to pain. And, that's what is. But the more I witness that, the more, even in early, right out of jail, right out of detox, the sooner you start becoming intimate with your mind, the sooner you'll see it's not your fault. The sooner you'll stop taking it so personal, and the sooner you'll stop obeying your mind, and you'll say, like, these thoughts have this mind has a mind of its own. This is not a trustworthy, ally in my life. This mind is crazy. I gotta keep coming back to my breath. I gotta keep acknowledging, like, oh, that's craving, that's aversion, that's judgment, that's self-centeredness, and so even in early practice, getting people on the cushion, and not for 5 seconds, and this idea that people can't, I just think it's bullshit. People won't. It's not easy. If you're not willing to be uncomfortable, then not only are you not going to be able to meditate, you're not going to be able to stay sober. If you're so averse to discomfort that you can't sit still for 15 or 20 minutes, no matter what's going on in you, good luck staying sober long term. And so the sooner we can teach people to sit here and be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay if your mind is loud. It's okay if your body's uncomfortable. You don't have to obey the cravings. You don't have to obey the aversions. You don't have to be a slave to your mind anymore. And this practice will break you free from that. And so right from the beginning, when I had the treatment center in detox, we would give people meditation. And even if they couldn't do it, but just put on the guided meditations. And, in refuge recovery meetings, we don't have a newcomers format of like, oh, you're new, you can only sit for 2 minutes, and sort of that low kind of, no, you can sit for 20 minutes. We're going to let you know you can do this. We're going to give you the instructions. Just stay in your seat. You'll be fine. It'll get easier and easier and easier. The old, keep coming back, keep doing this. The longer you do it, the more you'll have a tolerance for discomfort, the more you'll start to develop compassion for your own pain, the more you will create this internal intervention for the addictive process, rather than constantly running from it, rather than constantly replacing it with, like, if you're having a feeling, go help a newcomer, which isn't terrible advice either. That's also a good thing to do, but you know what I mean.
Well, that says a lot. I mean, when you were talking about in the room, in the group as part of the meeting, that was something I didn't get in my early peer-to-peer group scene, right? The meeting was a speaker, unless smoking was meditating, that we weren't doing any of that. And if I had others around me, I think that could have made such a big difference, right? The power of example. Now, are you surprised or disappointed in the growth of the sort of Buddhist recovery movement? Should it be broader? Are you surprised how popular it is? And do you see a lot of tribalism where people are, like even in AA, Big Book AA, or, Living Sober AA, or but tribalism between one fellowship and another. And I personally don't think it's helpful. I want to have a seat anywhere where people are talking about recovery. But some people are home team people, right? They just, do you come across that a lot? And how do you speak to that?
Well, I'm in a tricky position, Joe, since I was the founder. I was the first one to actually create a Buddhist recovery program. Mm-hmm. Darren had written a book, and someone else, there were a couple of people that had written some sort of reflections on Buddhist recovery stuff, mostly, and the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. Kevin Griffin and Darren. But I was the first one to say, actually, we can have our own program. And so, all of the offshoots are people that have sort of taken what I created in Refuge Recovery and made it their own and created new programs. And so then there are the sort of diehard refuge recovery, like, hey, we're the original, we're AA. Actually, I think that this is important, Joe. I was in an AA meeting recently in my hometown where I grew up, and an old timer said, it's so good to see Noah here. He said, and isn't Alcoholics Anonymous so amazing that it has given birth to Narcotics Anonymous? And it has given birth to all of the other anonymous programs. And it also gave birth to Refuge Recovery. And then Refuge Recovery gave birth to Recovery Dharma and all of these other kind of programs that have come along. And I like that, it's like it's a lineage. And there's always these different splits in lineages. So I sit in this place where whatever works for people like you, whatever works for people. And, AA is the perfect fit for some people, and Refuge Recovery is the perfect fit for people, and some combination is the perfect fit for some people. And other people maybe find what they need in, the 8-step process or the Recovery Dharma process or whatever it is, secular AA, atheist AA. It's, I'm glad that, maybe there's the mandala. And there's so many different pieces on a mandala, and there's so many different things that will work for different people. So I'm happy to be in that kind of part of the puzzle, whatever works for people. I will say something. I got to get this in here because I meant to throw it in earlier. I don't know if everybody's aware of this, and we could pull it up. There's a quote from Dr. Bob, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's from one of the letters on the spiritual experience, something official that he wrote in, I think it's 40s, maybe 50s. And he says, Buddhism's 4 Noble Truths, an 8-fold path, and he names the 4 truths in the 8-fold path. He says it could be a perfect addition or replacement to the 12 steps for treating alcoholism. I think that's really important for any big book thumpers out there to know that, who say, no, the 12 steps are the only way. You can't do Buddhism. That's self-will, blah, 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 whatever people say. The co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous didn't seem to think so. He seemed to think Buddhism would be a good addition or replacement for the 12 steps. And, so that's a flag I've been flying for the last 20 years or so since I heard about that.
If anyone wants that, it's the Akron pamphlets, and you can still get it from the Akron Intergroup. It's like $10 for 4 pamphlets, and one of them speaks exactly to that. Yeah, I mean, like any of us, there were times where Dr. Bob seemed a little closed-minded, and other times where he was profoundly inclusive. But in terms of the sort of growth of the popularity, are you surprised with it, or did you expect it to take off faster? What's it been like to sort of give birth to this sort of baby?
It was. I didn't have conscious expectations. I have a lot of ambition. I have a lot of I think that Buddhism is the perfect, I think everybody, would benefit from Buddhist meditation practice. But I also see this world as being pretty asleep and pretty lulled by some delusional philosophies, Judeo-Christian theistic philosophies that actually make the 12 steps make a lot more sense for most of the Western world, because it fits with their, historical, ancestral, what I see as delusional beliefs. So I don't really expect that Buddhism, a non-theistic humanist approach, will ever be all that big. My sense, and this is the Buddha also didn't think that Buddhism would be very big. He said he thought only a handful of people in every generation would truly be willing to do the hard work of meditation, the hard work of renunciation, of self-reliance, of taking full responsibility for their karma. He said, I think, there's some people, he said, those who have little dust in their eyes. So I have that feeling a bit about anybody who actually sincerely commits to a Buddhist path of awakening, whether they're a recovering addict or not a recovering addict. You know, and so now we have this situation where, well, was the Buddha wrong? Because there are billions of Buddhists. So he thought only a handful, but there's billions of Buddhists, but less than 10% of Buddhists meditate, do what the Buddha taught. So like everything else, it's been kind of co-opted by patriarchal power structures and churches and, you know, but the core practice of enlightenment, of transformation, isn't really happening in most of what calls itself Buddhism. Now we're doing this crazy thing in the West where we're not that interested in being Buddhists and in recovery, where we're not that, I'm a Buddhist teacher, but I don't give a shit about being a Buddhist. What I care about is being awake. I care about the outcome of the practices, the importance of meditation, the importance of renunciation. I don't care about statues. I don't care about dogma or ritual. I care about the Eightfold Path, which is a map to liberation, to recovery. And so we're doing this thing in the West where we're like practicing the Buddha's teachings, but we're not really Buddhists. And that's what's happening in Refuge, and that's what's happening in, you know, a lot of these things, you know, or all of the 12-step people who are doing mindfulness as their 11th step. They're doing Buddhist meditation as their 11th step. But they're not Buddhists, but they're practicing the teachings of the Buddha. I hope everybody understands that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, created mindfulness. Now that it's been secularized and it's all these cool apps and it's in psychology, and there was no such thing as mindfulness before the Buddha discovered it and taught it. It is Buddhism, even though the Western psychology and you know, recovery people or whoever, doctors, have kind of tried to strip the Buddhism out of it and just say mindfulness, secular mindfulness. Secular Buddhist meditation instructions, and Buddhism itself is secular, so you don't even have to call it secular.
Yeah, some will argue that Buddhism isn't a religion, it's a philosophy.
Yeah, maybe. Well, except for the, you know, billions of people that are treating it as their religion. Hard to argue with them.
I heard somewhere there are some Christians that aren't very Christ-like, but I haven't corroborated that.
Good dig. Hey, thanks very much, Joe. That's wonderful. Just a couple of questions we've had from, if you've got a question, send them my way. We're sort of only got a little while left. So if you've got a question for Noah, send them to myself or to Joe or to Daz or to Mike Stacey, who are your co-hosts tonight. And actually, Daz actually has a question. Daz, who lives in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire, exotic Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. He asked about your tattoos. He wants to know, are they punk tattoos? Are they Buddhist tattoos? Can you show us and enlighten us on what they consist of? Please.
I mean, mostly more Buddhist than punk. I've got a few punk rock. I've got this on my arm, this straight edge tattoo from 1989, which is kind of drug-free punk rock, which when I got sober was so helpful to have a group of punks that were drug-free punks. So I've got, but mostly I'm covered in Buddhas and, you know, kind of spiritual iconography.
Okay.
That is more interesting than putting a bunch of, you know.
Do you still get your tats? Do you still get tattoos done, or is that something in the past?
I do. I turned 50 this year, and I was trying to finish my body suit, like head to toe, before I turned 50. But I had a bad motorcycle accident a couple of years ago, and I was laid up for about a year. But I'm like 85. I'm almost 90% done. I've got one thigh that I need to finish to have my whole body covered.
Wow. We'll buy the
But I'm
calendar
not,
when it
it's
comes
not
out,
like
mate.
it's addictive or anything. It's not like,
No, not at all. No.
I could quit anytime I want, man.
Yeah, of course. Sounds like it. Yeah, I think there's definitely a 12-step program for tattoos. I think we should start one. So SJ asked this question. I'm not sure whether this is a trick question or not. What's the difference between this and recovery Dharma? She can only, or he or she can only listen because they're working.
So recovery Dharma, I think almost all of the recovery Dharma meetings were refuge recovery meetings. And that thing that we were talking about in the beginning, that accusation against me 3 years ago, the board of directors that I had kind of recruited for refuge recovery said, Noah, having this accusation, you're bad for business. We want you to go away. And I said, if it were true, I would go away, but this is actually not true. This isn't true. So they said, okay, well, if you won't go away, then we're going to go away and we're going to take as many meetings as we can with us. And about half of the refuge recovery meetings rebranded to become Recovery Dharma. Okay. And so they were existing refuge meetings and they just changed their name to Recovery Dharma. So that there's, so the difference is, what's the difference? The difference is in refuge recovery, we use the refuge recovery book and use early Buddhist-based interventions for, recovery. We're using the Buddha's Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. My understanding of recovery Dharma, and the person who asked would know better than I, is that it's a bit more broad. And one of the kind of issues was we want to be able to use any books and any Buddhist teachings and any meditations, whether they're Buddhist or not Buddhist. We want to do whatever we want. And I was against it, actually. I said, I think this is dangerous. If we start opening the door to non-Buddhist based meditations, you might get some things that aren't so helpful. You might get some, and also not that many Buddhist teachers are actually sober. Like there's there's a bunch of famous alcoholic Buddhist teachers like Chogyam Trungpa or Maizumi Roshi, or, like some of these
Alan Watts.
Famous Alan Watts, right? And be like, well, we're going to have a recovery meeting, but we're going to listen to Alan Watts while drunk giving this amazing Dharma talk. Hey, Alan's brilliant, but he's also a suffering alcoholic, right? Chogyam Trungpa is brilliant, but he was also a suffering alcoholic. So I was like, I don't think we can open to, all Buddhist teachers, and because a bunch of them are going to be like active addicts. I think we need to keep this to, a simple, thing. So recovery Dharma, from my understanding, is very wide, very broad in its kind of openness to any kind of practice, and anybody can do anything they want. Somebody, I don't know, I don't go, obviously I don't go, but that's what I've heard. Okay, well, just say to anyone who's listening or who's here now or is watching or doing whatever, it's like, if you don't believe us, check it out yourself. So it's like we always say to everything we've had talk about what Dr. Bob said, go and check it out yourself. You want to know about recovery Dharma, go and check it out yourself. Don't take our word for it. It's all, it's definitely not a thing about contempt prior to investigation. We encourage you, anything that comes on in this podcast, go and check it out yourself before you make any firm decisions. Okay, Jill S says, thank you, Noah. I haven't seen you since you did the retreat at the World Trade Center with Tara. Wow, that's a while ago. I had my hardcore punk 15-year-old daughter, Desi, who had just devoured Dharma Punx and idolized your ex-roommate. Woohoo. You were a profound influence, and I can't wait to tell her to check this out. So happy to see you and know you're well and steeped in your practice. That's from Jill. And Ben C, who I know, Ben's in the UK. He asks, is acting on anger wrong? Well, it depends on what kind of action we're talking about here. There's probably been some pretty amazing social justice, transformative actions that have come from anger at injustice, anger at ignorance. So I can't say like it's always wrong. Of course, from a Buddhist perspective, we want to try to see like what's actually underneath the anger. Considering that anger seems like most of the time a secondary emotion. What's the primary? What's the hurt? What's the fear? What's the grief? What's the sadness that is manifesting, being covered by the anger? So there is a famous Buddhist image that's used where the Buddha says, like speaking out of anger in like a harsh way, or acting out of anger, like in an unkind way, is like picking up a burning ember out of the fire to throw at your enemy. So there is this kind of perspective that's like, well, you're going to burn yourself while you're trying to hurt the person that you're angry at, by being. But that having been said, there's, I do love that bumper sticker that says, if you're not pissed off, you're not paying attention. Like you look at this world and, if you're not a little bit, concerned, hurt by what's happening on this planet, then there's something missing there. Now, anger isn't, being pissed off isn't the wisest response, but it's very natural. Right? Was it PIL? Johnny Lydon, anger is an energy, right? It's a natural human energy, but compassion is a much wiser energy to tap into if what you want is to make a positive change in this world. Anger hurts us, it hurts others, it's not very fluid, it's not very, it's sort of rigid. But compassion is this sort of like, I give a shit, I care, I want to create a positive change. I want to be out in the streets protesting. I want to be, involved in social and political and, action, but out of care, out of compassion, out of love, not out of hatred. And they're, the kind of two sides of one, of the coin of like, yeah, we want to change. Yeah, yes, I'm paying attention. I'm pissed off. And actually, I want to meet it with forgiveness. I want to meet it with compassion. And I want to do anything I can with my life's energy to help create a wiser culture, a wiser planet.
So just on that though, just to take you a little bit to task there, to explain to me, doesn't that create an identity and an egoic identity when you start associating yourself with a cause and you're either left wing or you're right wing or you're north wing or south wing or whatever it will be? Isn't that creating an egoic structure, if that's the right word?
Probably most of the time.
Okay.
I could just say no, not necessarily, but I want to say probably most of the time. So I want to use the Buddha as an example of a fully liberated person who, had no attachment, had no aversion, had only compassion, right? And he used his life to speak out against sexism. Because it wasn't a political stance to say inequality wasn't right. It was just the truth. And it wasn't a view and opinion. He used his life to speak out against racism. And it wasn't because he was a left-wing liberal, is because racism is fucking wrong all of the time. And that's the truth, and it wasn't a political stance. It was just, let's stop hurting each other.
Okay.
So most of the time we make it into our identity, and I'm an anti-fascist, or I'm a liberal, or I'm a, conservative, I'm liberal ideas, but fiscally conservative, whatever people want to make their identity about. But there is right and wrong. And I think we get a little philosophically too much into like, well, that's your truth and I have my truth. No, there is actually spiritual reality here, karmic reality of actually what is right and what is wrong. And hurting people and oppressing people is wrong and creates karma, whether it's based on gender or color or socioeconomic or class or whatever it is. It is a karmically unwholesome action that people, are responsible for. And that's not a political stance, that's a spiritual understanding.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you very much. just a few quick points, because I know that you threatened to give us a quick meditation. So if you're up for give us maybe a 5-minute meditation, I think there'll be a few people who'd be interested. Mark says the quote that you spoke about, "I think therefore I am," is by none other than René Descartes, who was a drunken fart. Yes, that's right. I think I drink therefore I am, from that great Monty Python philosopher's song. If you've not heard it, Heidegger was a boozy beggar who could drink you under the table. That's right. I love that. Yes, thank you very much for that. And so let's go on. So would you care to? I know we're coming to the end, so I'm just wondering if you might hang around after the podcast, just because I'm sure there's a few people who generally do want to ask questions afterwards, who are too a bit afraid to put them up during the recording. But if you'd be so kind as to lead us in a meditation for now, that'd be great, Noah. So if you're up for that, over to you, mate.
So if you'd like to join in a short meditation, just wherever you're at, take a posture that is relaxed and upright. Allow your eyes to be closed and take a moment to release any unnecessary tension. Bring your mindfulness into your body and see if your jaw is tight, release it. If your shoulders are tight, let gravity pull them away from the ears a little bit. If your belly is tight, as you exhale, try to soften your belly. Just settling into this present time experience of our humanness, our human body sitting upright. And then drop the awareness, the consciousness out of the thinking mind and into the feeling body. Let the thoughts be in the background for a moment as you pay attention to what your breath feels like right now. The Buddha's simple initial meditation instruction was breathing in. One knows I'm breathing in. Breathing out, one knows I'm breathing out. So what allows you to know the breath as it comes and goes? Mindfulness of the breath is the initial practice often, but we're not trying to stop the mind from thinking. Letting the thoughts be there, rising and passing. The mind can be as busy as it likes, but you can choose to pay attention to your breath. Pay attention to your body sitting here. And reflect for a moment on this image from my teacher's teacher. He says meditation, this whole path of awakening, can be brought down to just 2 words: let go. Let go of your views and opinions. Let go of the past. Let go of the future, and even letting go of needing this moment to be any different than it is. Clinging, the craving, the resistance that causes our suffering. Relinquish it all, let it go. He said, if you let go a little bit, you'll have a little bit of happiness. If you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of happiness, a lot of freedom. And he said, if you let go absolutely, you'll know the happiness of the Buddha, the awakened mind, heart. He says the mind will become quiet and still like a forest pool. And all kinds of strange and wonderful animals will come to drink from the stillness. The strange and wonderful animals, of course, are our thoughts and our emotions. Stillness isn't an absence of visitors. It's just being unmoved, unattached, not aversive. So whatever visits, the demons, the angels, all of it. Right here with this breath, this body, this heart, this mind. The truth can be revealed through our own attention. The impermanent nature of all things can lead us to non-attachment. We begin to become more and more compassionate towards our own pain and the pain of others. You're turning towards and observing and feeling what's happening moment to moment in here. We wake up to the reality that this mind truly does have a mind of its own, continues to think and plan and remember. You're really not your fault. Don't take it so personally. When you're ready, you can allow your eyes to be open. That was probably about 5 minutes. And this was a fun. It was fun for me. It's fun for me. I hope I didn't offend too many people. But you know, if I did, call your sponsor. Do it.
Yes, fantastic. So just we always finish off with the same question. So, but I just wanted to say thanks again to Nina. I know Nina's our mutual friend who's introduced us. So to get you to come along, and she's got a camera off. No, she's turning it on. She's got that lovely refrigerator. Everyone look at Nina's refrigerator in the background. She's very proud of that refrigerator. What a refrigerator that is, Nina. She doesn't want anyone to see a refrigerator, but we're looking at it now. Everyone make sure you look right at the refrigerator. Yeah? So thanks, Nina. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina. Nina's been doing a hell of a lot of service at the moment, as is Joe C., who's always been a great co-host, as is my mate Daz from Huddersfield, and Mike Stacey, who I think has dropped off. So thanks very much to a fantastic team. Noah, just quickly, do you hold virtual things on Zoom where people from all over the world could attend? Are there any? What website should we go to? I know I put one on there before. Is there any one in particular?
So refugerecovery.org, if you want to check out peer-led refuge recovery meetings. And those are all time, all over. You should be, every day. There's about 100 online meetings, I think, so you'll be able to find one. Also on Refuge Recovery, I do a teaching once a month. The first Thursday of the month, I do a meditation and a talk for recovery stuff. So you can check that out. And then on againstthestream.com, every Monday night at 7:30 Pacific time, I do my weekly meditation class where I do a Dharma lecture and a guided meditation. And you can do that. They're both on Zoom. So if you go to the Against the Stream site, then you can find that. And then I teach retreats, in-person retreats. All of those information will be on the Refuge site and the Against the Stream site.
So that's Pacific time. Obviously, you're in California. So thank you very much. And you've been a great guest. So this is the final question. So Buddha has looked on you very favorably. Imagine that. And the pennies that you're getting by at the moment suddenly convert into billions, and you become a billionaire overnight. Happy days for you. You're packing all the the teaching and everything. You think you're finally going to get something nice for yourself, so you decide to buy yourself a mega yacht, as you do, and you get all your worldly possessions, chuck it on the mega yacht, bring your friends and your family with you on this mega yacht, and you set sail off from California there and hightail it on the seven seas, and you think everything's going swimmingly. However, off the coast of Fiji, you strike a submerged coral reef, and the boat starts to sink very quickly. So all your friends and family hightail it, dive overboard, swim to a nearby deserted island, and all you've got time to do is grab a plastic bag, go down to your bookcase and find your favorite book, chuck it in the plastic bag, dive overboard and swim to join your friends. And you've got this book to keep you company, your favorite book, to keep you company until you are rescued. What's the book? Who's it by? And why?
Oh man, this is a terrible question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would like to take something. I like pleasure, so I would like to take something pleasurable. But I'll pretend like I'm a good Buddhist, and I'll say like I'm going to take like the Buddhist suttas. Like this is. But the truth is, this book is so unpleasant to read.
Oh yeah?
Like, yeah, the way that the original teachings are read, they're written in triplicate, and because they were chanted, and you have to really like dig through them to get to the like good teachings. And there's a bunch of religious bullshit in there that probably didn't have anything to do with what the Buddha. It's like the Bible or something. Like, you know,
oh God,
like 10% of it's true. I don't know.
Mate, skip that. Go back on the boat. Quickly go back on the boat. Grab another book. Come on. That's bollocks.
You know what? I can't answer, but I just finished, because I had never read it. I just finished The Count of Monte Cristo, and I'd missed it. You know, I didn't go to high school. I was smoking crack, so like I just finished it. And it was a really fun read and interesting to look at through a Buddhist perspective of karma and of forgiveness and the lack of forgiveness, and you know, the regret when you get the revenge that you've been seeking, and how unsatisfactory it actually all is.
And that's a very spooky moment, because you're the second guest who said The Count of Monte Cristo. Go figure. Boom. Listen, that's been a great. So if you want to hang around afterwards, that's Noah Levine. It's been fantastic having you here. Sorry, everyone, I've got a bit of a cold. I've been away on holiday and I've developed the lurgy. But just to say, next week we ain't going to be here. It's a free week next week, but then the following week we've got none other than Helen Hamilton, who's a woman from England who says that she's enlightened and does a lot of work with a lot of people in recovery. So please come. That's the following week. That's not next Friday, the Friday after. But until then, I'm going to stop recording and say adios, adios. Woohoo! Right. Thanks, Noah. That was wonderful, mate. So has anyone got any questions? Anyone got any questions now? Raise your hand and you're free to ask them. If not, we'll let Noah go, because I know he's very busy, man. Oh, there's PK. Always PK's. PK from New York. PK, over to you, mate.
Hey, awesome. Hey, thank you so much, David, for holding this space. And Noah, it's great to catch you live. If I say I'm a fan of your work, that would sound kind of weird, but hey, I'm a fan of your practice and work. I had a question for you regarding, I can't remember where I read it, but someone had said like the ultimate Buddhist wouldn't even consider themselves a Buddhist because they would have kind of dispensed with the ownership of the identification. And that's kind of what I heard you saying, sort of. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but what's on that?
What is that about, you think?
Like, so the dropping of the labels, ultimately, almost to the point where we transcend the person. And what is it with us Jews and Buddhism and Hinduism and cracking ass, all that stuff?
There might be there's considered in classical Theravadan Buddhism, there's 4 levels of enlightenment, and one of the first levels called stream entry. One of the things that leaves us is attachment to the religious rituals and identification with religion. But also put that in context of, like, you know, a monk or a nun, a person who becomes the Buddha, you know, himself, who became enlightened. He did no longer, they still had all of the ethics, all of the values, all of the practices. You know, someone like the Dalai Lama, maybe he's an enlightened being and doesn't really identify. He knows that being a Buddhist is not his true identity, but he still plays the role of being a Buddhist. So it's not kind of forsaking, kind of saying like, well, I'm not a Buddhist anymore externally. It's internally knowing Buddhism is not who I am. I'm this process of thoughts and feelings and sensations, and, you know, there's not such a identity with it.
Yeah, well, I really resonate with your story because I kind of grew up a similar way, in a real rebellious way, and almost at the point of toward where I am now, I don't want to say I've disabled that person, but that person led me to who I am now. And like you seem like a really insightful and wise cat. And I feel like, do you feel like that the road to get you there, it couldn't have been any other way? Do you feel like, in other words, or there's there can't really be any assessment of the past because it's in the books, so to speak? Or do you feel like you kind of needed to go through the fire to get to where you're at?
I can say yes, but I'm also just hesitant to pretend like I would, you know, like, I don't feel super fatalistic about stuff, and there's lots of different decisions we could make along the way. But, you know, we made the decisions we made, and we turned out the way we turned out, and here we are. So,
all right, well, awesome. Thank you for your sharing, and Nina is awesome. I regularly, you know, have fellowship with her, and it makes sense that you and her are connected, because it's, you know, it's all about interconnectivity, right? All right. Well, thank you, man.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Good on you, PK. Okay, so no more hands up. So so we might call it a day. So thank you very much, everyone. So I'll thank you very much once again, Noah. It's been fantastic, mate, and I hope you come back to see us again. It's great, and I'll be in touch. Thank you very much, everyone.
My pleasure. Really good to spend some time with y'all.
Yeah, all right. Adios, everybody. See you, Jeb. Good to see you, Jeb. See you later, mate. See you, Leanne. See you, Darcy, Laura, Joe, Josie, Nina, Gary, Dale, Harlan, Karen in Australia. Good to see you, Karen. We love our Aussies here. Hey, Joe. Hey, Bob T. PK, I'll just PayPal it to you, mate. Wait, on PayPal. Here you go.
And take care of your pre-holiday cold.
Yeah, no, it's not. I've tested, so it's.
I figure as much.
Yeah. That was the first thing I did. Yeah. It was all good. So thanks very much. All right, everyone. So thanks very much, everyone. So I'm gonna shut down in 30 seconds.
Okay.
All right.
Safe travels, David. We'll be talking.
Yeah, I'll speak to you down the line. Thank you very much, Joe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,